I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're relaxing, sitting back, and taking a look at the easiest boss in every Soulsborne game. Last week, I covered my hardest bosses from each of the Soulsborne games, so if you haven't checked that video out, link in the top right corner. Today though, we get the opposite. The bosses that try so hard to be intimidating, or difficult, or a boss, and just for whatever reason, they can't get it going. Maybe they have a low health pool, maybe they have easily telegraphed moves, or maybe they're just born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. Whatever the case, it's time to crush some dreams and roast some bosses over the coals, as we dissect why on earth they were a boss to begin with. So let's pick up the pace, the easiest boss in each Soulsborne game, ranked. And be sure to let me know your easiest bosses in the comments below. Well, Demon Souls isn't exactly lacking for easy bosses, is it? Every battle seemingly has a way to cheese it, a boss weakness that causes the fight to go from minorly threatening to an absolute joke. Yet for me, there are two options that stand above the rest for their simplicity. Our runner-up is my least favourite boss in Demon Souls, the Adjudicator, found at the end of 4-1. He's a gimmick boss with a very long tongue and a large wound in his stomach. The only way to damage him is to hit the bird atop his head, and there are two ways you can go about this. You can do the way I do it, and hit his stomach wound to make him kneel over, revealing his weak point with stupidly low health. Pretty simple, straightforward. Or from the top level of the room, snipe the bird with arrows. Also pretty simple, straightforward, even gets you an achievement in the remake. But at least this boss requires some thought. No, my pick for the easiest Demon Souls boss, even though I love this goober to death, it's Leechmonger from 5-1. The Leechmonger sadly doesn't have the most dynamic moveset in the universe, with lots of slow, telegraphed swings and an arena that keeps you out of his range for most of the fight until you get close. His weakness is fire, and a vendor nearby sells you turpentine to light your sword with flames. And with that caveat, it's like cutting a hot knife through butter. The Leechmonger can heal, but if you're purposefully trying to kill it and not postponing the end of the fight like me in my footage, it goes down immediately. Other bosses in other games have weaknesses too, but I've never seen such a blatant amount of damage from a weakness than with Leechmonger, giving him the title of Boletaria's bitch. When it comes to Dark Souls, the difficulty does ramp up in terms of boss design, with less easy picks to choose from. There's the Asylum Demon, the original first boss, who you can easily destroy with firebombs as your starting gift, or from plunging onto his head and smacking him with your weapon. But like, that's a tutorial boss. It's meant to be easy. Something like the Moonlight Butterfly, where a majority of the fight is avoiding slow-paced magic attacks, is not meant to be easy, but for most players, it is. While I sometimes struggle to dodge the magic when I'm locked on, it's not like the Moonlight Butterfly will kill people very often. But you have to search deep to find anyone who has played Dark Souls who has ever died to Pinwheel. Who else was it going to be? Pinwheel is the easy boss of the Soulsborne series, the poster boy for disappointing difficulty everywhere. This man, woman, child cannot catch a break. His health pool is so drastically small that regardless of when you fight him, you can destroy his HP in just a few hits. Which means regardless of how cool his fight could be, which it had so much potential by the way, you're not going to see it unless you purposefully go out of your way to have him spawn in his clones and go nuts. And you can't even enjoy his boss music, which is extremely creepy and off-putting in the best way, as you'll only hear the first 10 to 15 seconds in any given playthrough. No other boss in Dark Souls goes down like Pinwheel, and that means he's certain to be Lordran's easiest fight. Ah yes, Dark Souls 2. The game where, once you have a decent build, you can melt every single boss in the game without so much as breaking a sweat. We have a good chunk of bosses to pick from here. If we're going high profile, the old Iron King deserves a shout out for having one of the most overly telegraphed movesets of all time. His swings are so slow, his fire breath is so slow, it's rare that he uses any of his most devastating attacks, and it says a lot that they had to add an annoying hole into the back of the arena, otherwise nobody would be dying to him. I could chuck the twin Dragon Riders from Drangleic Castle in as well. The original Dragon Rider gets a pass for potentially being the first boss of the game, but these guys are so fragile, and for the point in the game where you fight them, they're nothing but a bump in the road. They have killed me before once or twice though, so I can't really select them. I'd be crucified if I didn't mention the Covetous Demon in Earthen Peak, our little goober, Jabba the Hutt lookalike with his roly-polies and his easily telegraphed moveset that means you'll almost never get hit if you're remotely good at the game. I love him so much. But sometimes he catches me off guard, and he does have a cool grab attack that strips you of your armor. It will never land, but it's cool. No, just like in Dark Souls 1, there's only one boss that truly fits this bill, and it's the Prowling Magus and Congregation in the Brightstone Cove Seldora Church. Because this isn't a boss fight, this is a series of regular enemies who have been given a health bar. The Prowling Magus himself is woefully weak, and the only danger of this fight comes from the clerics in the Congregation who know how to use magic. The crawling weak hollows on the floor are nothing to be scared of, and the only danger this fight poses is if those clerics get a lucky shot or two off on you. There's no other boss in this game that I feel can be slain this quickly, this late into the playthrough, and I'll be curious to see if anybody can raise me an easier boss in Dark Souls 2 in the comments. And don't say the Royal Rats, they at least have Petrification and Toxic to back themselves up difficulty-wise. If I could just take a few moments of your time, I'm trying to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2023. I don't know if we can do it, but I'd love to try. Look at how many of my viewers aren't subscribed. Let's rectify that. Be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on my weekly content. Back to the video. Switching over to Bloodborne, we're blessed with the fact that a majority of the bosses in this game are either average difficulty or above, with just 3 bosses that I could pick out right now who would bottom this list in terms of ease. The first would be the One Reborn. As for the point in the game you face it, it's a bit of a letdown. It doesn't have the most devastating attacks, and as long as you keep moving around or have the strength to stagger it with your heavy attacks like my Kirk Hammer, you'll melt this guy's health bar quickly. Of course you have to kill the Bell Maidens first though, so for that, I can't call it the easiest boss. Then there's the Witches of Hemwick. This fight can be made incredibly simple by entering with 0 insight, as the witches will be unable to spawn their besties, the evil spirits, that are the real danger here. But most players won't know that trick if it's their first time through, and they'll be more focused on the crowd control and dodging the witches' surprisingly hard to avoid magic attacks instead. No, for me the easiest boss in the game is the Celestial Emissary, fought in the Lumenflower Gardens of Upper Cathedral Ward. At least with the witches you can make the case that they're fought much earlier in the game, so the difficulty makes some sense. With these guys, they're just regular enemies, and one of them happens to take the damage of the boss health bar. The fact I already almost beat the boss before the enemy could transform into its giant blue goober stage is proof enough. Had I not been prolonging the fight for footage, the Emissary would already be dead. It's the quickest fight in the game, and since it happens so late into the story, you've probably got a +8 or +9 weapon at this point, so you shouldn't have any issues. The real boss of Upper Cathedral Ward is Abriatus. These are just the starter, the entree. But they have a boss health bar, so Bloodborne's easiest boss, congratulations! I'm going to give Dark Souls 3 some credit. They have created a boss roster that, on first glance, doesn't have any pinwheels in it. Even the easiest bosses in this game require a little bit of thought. The Deacons of the Deep, as an example, may be a group of enemies that can harm, but they're also a lesson in crowd control. For as easy as the Deacons are to stagger and injure, you can find yourself stun-locked by attacks if you find yourself surrounded, so they can't be the easiest boss. What about the Crystal Sage? No, I know people consider him extremely easy with his health, but I've also seen a lot of complaints about how his magic can one-shot or two-shot early builds, and that's an immediate disqualification for the honor of the easiest Dark Souls 3 boss. A High Lord Wolnir perhaps fits the bill of the easiest boss. After all, once you know the gimmick is to destroy his 3 rings, you can plan a run at the boss and destroy all 3 in genuinely record time. The only danger being the boss's AI, as he might decide to hang back one of his arms beneath those abyssal mists. However, by a technicality, there is an easier boss, and it's my favourite punching bag, the Ancient Wyvern. Because technically, and this is me being so pedantic, the difficulty of the fight doesn't come from the Wyvern, but the level around the Wyvern. I refuse to call this a boss arena. I died to the Archdragon Peak enemies before. I haven't died to the Wyvern's flame breaths or stomps before. This boss goes down in one hit and barely has the opportunity to actually fight you since you just ignore him for most of the battle. We truly are disrespectful. Unless you fail the final plunging attack, or you're not careful when the Wyvern does attempt to flame breath the level, you're going to be done with this boss so quickly. So you know what? I'll leave it up to you guys. The Ancient Wyvern or High Lord Wolnir? Who's the easiest boss? Comment section, you know what to do. In a game like Sekiro, easy boss fights are very few and far between, so of the roster, only 2 really fit the bill here. The Folding Screen Monkeys are my runner-up boss. Fought in Senpo Temple, you have to chase them throughout the boss arena and slay them, but each monkey has a different gimmick. One can see really well, one can hear really well, one can make a lot of noise, and one hides behind you constantly. However, I've mentioned in past videos, this fight tends to devolve into just chasing the monkeys like mad, and with a few demonic spirit monkeys that can appear throughout the fight to curse you, I would say that's sufficient danger. Nay, the easiest boss in Sekiro also happens to be a spectacle cinematic boss that I believe was designed with the intention of being easy. It's the Divine Dragon of Fountainhead Palace. The first phase is basically designed to be a power fantasy, as you can jump off the roots that try to spear you to do massive damage to the tree spirits, and once you've killed enough, the Divine Dragon appears itself and the battle truly starts. You have to dodge wind slices as you advance towards the dragon, then using a lightning reversal, strike your foe with a lightning spear before rinsing and repeating. The only point in this fight that you could realistically die at is the final portion, where the dragon gets more aggressive with his sword swings, throwing out harder combinations to avoid, but it's a matter of time, and that's okay. Sometimes having an easy boss is good if it serves that cinematic purpose. We don't need every boss in a Soulsborne game to make us clench our controllers with frustration or fear or horror or anger. Just having a good time with a good dragon, vibing to some great music, and slicing his eye open to get some tears is all that matters. If there's an easier full-scale boss in Sekiro than the 2 listed, please let me know, because I can't find them. And finally we reach Elden Ring. Of course, I'm only focusing on main bosses for this list, so no. As much as I love Soldier of Godric and was tempted to meme him into the Elden Ring boss rankings, the man died in one hit, let him rest. Pero there really is only one Elden Ring boss that both is easy to fight and doesn't affect my health. My secondary option was Fear's Champions, but that final phase almost killed me with Lionel's death magic on my last playthrough. I love this fight, but the Mimic Tear of Nokron is the easiest boss in the game. Now, what a novel concept, being able to fight a clone of yourself with the equipment you're wearing, if you're a good person, that is. If you're someone who purposefully takes off gear and only puts it back on after the Mimic Tear transforms, I'm sorry, you don't get a say in this ranking because you chose to make the boss as easy as possible, whereas I dealt with the hand given and still made light work of the Mimic Tear. Sadly, a boss that's supposed to mimic your moveset will always feel hollow when you fight, because you're the only person who knows exactly how to get the most out of your weapons and armor. You'll find the Mimic Tear spamming strong weapon arts, but you should know how to handle that. Its HP is laughable, and 9 times out of 10, you won't get hurt unless you're purposefully looking to take a bit of damage to make the fight more interesting. I wish the Mimic Tear was a bit better at mimicking the playstyle of the player, But I imagine that would take some serious wizardry in the coding, and we can't blame FromSoft for that. I have a soft spot for the Mimic tier, but there's no denying that no other fight in the game feels quite so simple and quite so easy. Well, thank you everyone for watching today's video. I know it was a shorter one, but there's much less you can say about easy bosses than hard bosses, let me tell you. I tried. I'm still on vacation, but I will be back very soon, and with that will come more Soulsborne rankings, and more importantly, more Zelda rankings. I've been very excited to start replaying the Zelda games. So be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my weekly content. My socials are on screen now, feel free to follow me where you feel comfortable. I would recommend my Twitter, as I always do. And a massive shout out to my patrons over on Patreon. You guys are awesome, your support means the world. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time. Adios.